Robert, it's so good to see you again.
We meet again, this time again in cyberspace.
And that's absolutely remarkable. And we are making it again, and we are proving that the conversation is worth having and it's still very enjoyable.
We're
So,
headed certainly towards double figures with a long term plan of getting to triple figures.
absolutely. But yes, which is the 100. I mean, it's a magical number, which you rightly said it means conversation for around 2 years. And
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that.
me too.
So today, we wanted to talk about building teams in business, in academia, in enterprise, but building teams of really clever, very smart people who often are much smarter, stronger than the leader themselves, particularly in certain aspects of the work. And let me just kickstart this because I think theoretically, people would say, of course, you need to hire people who are smarter than you, at least in the domains that they are in. But do you think that sometimes leaders, in an unconscious way, avoid hiring people who might outshine them?
So I'm going to say three things because that's what you often expect me to say.
Yes.
First of all, I can think of almost no domain in which real success is just individual success.
Mm,
Even though when it's an author or an artist or an entrepreneur, we hear a story of how this one person did this amazing thing.
yeah.
There is always a story behind the story of the people who supported them and the resources and expertise and love and energy and goodwill and finance
Mm,
and all of the other things. So teams are just everywhere. And I think
mm,
that is, it's a good thing. Um, Second thing I would say is that everybody intellectually says, yes, you should hire people who are smarter than you.
mm,
But say, emotionally, it's tough. And that's because we have ego. And so
yes.
the third thing that I would say is that I'm not so sure it's that people resist hiring people who are smarter than them. I think it's that they tend to hire people who are like them rather than unlike them.
Mm,
So when you interview, if you're interviewing for a position in a team that you're part of or are leading, can't help think that one of the things you're going to think is, will I get on with this person?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you see five or six candidates in quick succession and you ask them a set of, can you give me an example of a time when you have done whatever it is you're going to do in this team, which is supposedly making this process fair and transparent. And what you're listening for are these cues in what's said and how it's said and in body language as to whether or not you're going to like this person and they're going to like you. And I think, therefore, we tend to hire in our own likeness.
Mm,
And in our own likeness means that the team isn't quite as diverse. And in our own likeness, it's harder to tell when somebody who's completely outside of your frame of reference really, really is way smarter than you, because you probably wouldn't hire them in the first place. Not
mm,
necessarily because they're smarter than you, but because you wouldn't recognize that they're smarter than you.
mm. This is very insightful, Robert. And I think it's that change of the framing. I find it very helpful because if someone who who belongs to the same frame of values that we have, and a person that we perceive as easy to work with, and they are nice from our point of view, then it's fine to be better than us in area A or B or C or even A, B, and C. But if the person seems to be clever or smart, but we are perceiving while we are hiring them or recruiting them, we perceive them as who might be difficult, for example, difficult, quote unquote. Would we go for that? And I think this is just very interesting light you are shedding on this topic, and
There's a
probably
strategy person. I'm going to interrupt. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm going to interrupt into a strategy thing and think of a
yeah,
2 by 2 matrix.
yes,
So one of the things that's going on in an interview process is, will I like this person or will they be difficult? Right?
mm,
And sometimes maybe a really insightful leader will think, actually what I need is somebody who's a bit contrary and difficult and argue because we get on too well. The whole team gets on too well, and we need some grit to form an oyster around. So like or difficult. And then in the other dimension is same skill set or unrecognizably different skill set.
Mm,
And I think
mm,
there's probably something in that about trying to understand how you would recognize when someone who is difficult is just a genius at something that you don't know how to do versus someone who's brilliant that you get along with, who you trust. And because you trust them, you think, okay, well, we've never done it like this before, but this new colleague of mine has said if I coded this thing in Python, then it just does it automatically. So, well,
mm.
I'll try it. And then you discover whole new ways of working.
So this is uh yeah, this is a very helpful way of looking at it, because I can now connect it to the theme of our all of our conversations. So this, you called it a 2+2, I call it a map. So when map is running out, and you are moving away from, because you from just we just add some other player to the team who is nice and who would play along and all of that, but there is a new dimension or new area we are going to, where we need a totally different strength, and maybe this strength will come in a way at a price. So here I think the balancing act would be, if I introduce that new player who clearly has some skills that we believe are needed in the unmapped area of our work, of our universe, of our world, and but having him or her joining the team may have an impact on the rest of the team. So how do we balance that? I think that would be maybe the question for us. I'm just asking myself, how do I test for this? What question in a job interview would I ask to just see that the balance is right? Because the skill may be there, but if that person won't really be playing with the rest of the team, and the rest of the team will feel left behind, that, I don't know, may not be the best outcome.
I guess that it depends on whether one has absolute foresight, and of course, none of us do. But
Mm,
as you were speaking, I was thinking of stories I have heard of other great partnerships and great breakthroughs. And I can think of one story, I won't remember the details of it, but of someone who made an amazing breakthrough in the treatment of some disease or other, whose colleagues all said, but he's still a deeply unpleasant person because he's so disrespectful all the time and he's so rude and so driven. But that very drivenness is the thing that led him to make a breakthrough that nobody else would have made.
mm,
And so, what that was making me think is about the balance between the commitment to the end game. Like if the end game is to get an Olympic gold medal or a patent or to be the biggest in an industry, or versus the commitment to the culture of the team.
mm, mm.
And so that
I
always takes you to this place of what behaviors will you tolerate and for how long and with what consequences.
mm. And actually, sometimes people, when they are on the genius scale, they may not be necessarily um, very nice or kind, and then you again, you need to make a decision. Do you accept that genius who may not be kind, or accept someone who may have maybe less of these skills, but it's better for the team? And these questions will be the ultimate, I think, uh, sort of deciders of leadership, because as a leader, you have one vacancy, you can take only one person, and you have to live with that decision. And I guess that's leadership. There's no map, or the map has run out, and you are working with that.
And so you're making me think about two things. One is your question of what would you ask at an interview?
Mm,
And so you could ask at an interview, which is more important to you as a potential member of this team, the work or the team? Because
yes.
you would then get to an answer which is, and of course, people, that's not an easy question. If I was asked that question, I'm not quite sure what I would say, because ultimately, if you want to put somebody on the moon, or if you want to invent a new thing,
Yep.
the work is the work is the work.
Yes.
But ultimately, I said at the beginning of this conversation, I can think of nothing that gets done individually. I mean, I can
Yeah.
think of heroic stories that exclude all the really important
Yeah.
people who actually helped make it happen, you know, who made the coffee and bought the resources and smoothed over the HR problems created by the difficult colleague, and so on and so on and so on. But the other answer is also true. You know, you have to want to be part of the team, and the
Yeah.
culture is really what you will tolerate. In terms of actual culture is really what you won't tolerate. What beyond which you just cannot do that. Can't
Mm.
treat people like that. So you're making me think about how you would test for such a thing.
Mm.
But you were also making me think that you said, you know, somebody who's got that characteristic of genius or maverick around them.
Yes.
One of the reasons that they are quite difficult is because they are wired up to see a different world than you. So rather than thinking of a singular sense in which there is a map and it is running out, I go back to an earlier conversation where there are layers to the map,
Yeah.
and you're maybe looking at the road network, and they're maybe looking at the power grid, or they're maybe looking at the rail network, or
Mm.
and so the whole reason for the frustration is they're not looking at the same thing as you. Although, in one sense, we're all looking at the same territory, we are seeing different dynamics and prioritizing and privileging different things.
Mm. That's true, and probably now if I add the leadership sort of angle or dimension, maybe you as a leader would be the interface for that team member with the team, because you know that the skill, the capability, the genius of that person is needed, because you are really going into new territory, and then you will be probably, being there, reinterpreting, interfacing, and hope and hoping that eventually other people will see that that value in them. But I actually remembered. I don't know whether it's the same example that you talked about. That doctor in Vienna who had, before the germ theory, who noticed that when women give birth in the hospital, they all develop all sorts of infections, while when they are delivered by the doctors, while when a nurse is delivering their babies, their health is better. So he had this hypothesis: maybe the doctors need to wash their hands. And back then, believe it or not, doctors used not to wash their hands. They would examine a cadaver and then go and do a delivery, because people didn't know about the germs. So he actually waited for one time where I think most of the doctors, of all of them, went for a conference somewhere. So all the deliveries were done by the nurses, and he recorded almost no infection on that day or two. The moment the doctors came back, the infections level went up. So he went to his colleagues and he said, "Look, I just want you to wash your hands with soap." And these doctors felt insulted. Do you mean we are dirty? We are. What do you mean? We're gentlemen. We don't need to. I mean, this word was used. We're gentlemen. We don't need to wash our hands. And he tried and tried, and he ended up in a mental asylum, because he sort of knew something, and nobody believed him. So sometimes I think that balance between, I'm just imagining if there was, I don't know, a hospital manager or some great leader who would sort of interpreted this and managed to get some of his ideas into practice, and that would have saved so many lives. I don't know whether probably you were thinking of the same medical case or something
I think
similar, but it is.
I was thinking of a different story, but there is a connection to another story I heard only a few weeks ago. So Florence Nightingale, who's often recorded as someone who's hugely influential in the status of nursing, had a
Mm,
similar thing about infection control, but in field hospitals in military conflict. And the thing that I heard, the story that I heard was she had recorded this data about the number of infections and, the basics of separating patients far enough and having curtains between the beds so that, there wasn't the opportunity for cross infection. And she was also, alongside being a nurse, she was a statistician. And
Mm,
so she produced one of the world's first pie charts to show what happened in different circumstances and showed that when the hospital was laid out differently and there was better hygiene and better ventilation and separation of patients, that, infections and recoveries and outcomes were much better. And the point of the story was partly that, but partly also that the data that was taken across a period of time, and early in the conflict, the most seriously injured soldiers came in, and they had the worst outcomes because they had the most serious injuries. And by the time she started presenting the data, some of the people who came in later were less severely injured and less likely to die as a result of their injuries. And the implication was she kind of knew that, but she knew that the statistical analysis would be the thing that would change the behaviour of the government to invest in facilities and training and cleanliness hygiene, because she knew she was right. And she knew that the data, if she presented it properly, would say, well, it's a bit more marginal. And so there's something about knowing something and then knowing how
mm,
to get that message across. And then the other thing that I was reflecting is that let's just be modest for a moment and suggest that neither you or I are geniuses, neither you or I have run companies that have changed the world and are billionaires. But you and I have led teams in lots of different places and in lots of different ways. And I found myself, as you were explaining what a leader would be doing in going around trying to explain, is that I can certainly think of examples of going after a difficult part of a meeting or after a difficult interaction, saying, so what they were really trying to say is, and what
mm,
they're trying to get at is, and the sort of social repair required to accommodate disruptive behaviours when it's still delivering for the team versus the kind of conversations that happen when that disruptive behaviour is not delivering for the team and is just
mm.
socially unacceptable or unpleasant.
Right. So I think this is very helpful and reaffirms the role of the leader of recognizing whether you have a map or you don't have a map, or you have a map but at a different sort of level of details, and trying to provide the map, taking a risk on the map that they think it is the right map for the territory that they are expanding into, and getting the right people to hopefully follow the map, or make the map with them as they speak. And hopefully that also bridges the gap between, we all intellectually want people who are better than us, but at the same time, we believe that we bring something to the table that that put our egos at ease, because then that is the role of the leader, integrating the map, making sure that people are looking at the same map and driving the same direction.
Definitely. And I think that's a slightly more sophisticated answer than just you should hire people who are smarter than you. Trying to
Mm,
understand what stops you doing that and how you would know that they're smarter than you is
yes.
really useful. So in a future episode, we might try to find people who claim at least that that's what they did and to understand how they made that judgment call, a
Mm,
point when maybe they didn't fully understand the nature of the breakthrough
mm,
insight skill set that somebody was going to bring.
right. That's a good plan. So if I were to move to my next question, and let's assume that we've hired those who are smarter than us, and we put them together in the team. How do we keep them in? How do we uh, keep motivating them towards, the bigger goal of the team?
In the last few conversations, I feel we've spoken in some of my territory around framing and strategy. And
Mm,
I think the answer lies in your territory, which is about purpose and impact. So, one of my things with colleagues is often to say, I really don't mind if you're planning to outgrow us. I don't see that as an act of disloyalty. I see it as a thing which is good for you and good for us.
Mm,
And I think that's one of the challenges in teams where you get stagnation is because you're quite good at this thing. We need you to be quite good at this thing. You've expressed a desire to learn something new, and I don't really need that from you. And
right.
so the way in which you keep people motivated is to keep the possibility of working with them to deliver their goal, not your goal. And
Mm.
if their goal is to be prime minister or to be marketing director or to be provost or in a job which is not necessarily either directly in line with what they're currently doing or directly available in your organization, it's still a good conversation to have.
I agree with you. And actually, when I was thinking of this question, if you were to ask it to me, I would, and if I had only one word to answer with, it would have been purpose. And I think that is the purpose map is one of the most important, uh, most inclusive, most powerful and deep maps to have at all. And I think these are the ones that leaders need to uh, own and ensure that people understand and appreciate. And I think this is the purpose and impact is a very powerful way. Maybe is one of the best, if not the only way, to have a sustained way of keeping people together and motivating them to staying the course.
And you used the phrase keeping people together, and actually I think that might be one of the challenges is
Mhm.
keeping people together whilst it's good for everybody to be together. But there is
Yes.
something about recognizing the transient nature that you were a colleague for a season, not forever, and that that season was for a particular reason, and when it outgrows that situation, that's okay.
Yes.
And I
Mm.
certainly, I'll be clearer. I think I am often guilty of imagining that work relationships are a bit like familial or friendship relationships, that they should be
Mm.
forever and you should want them to last indefinitely. And in actual fact, in work, it's perfectly okay to say, look, we had a great 2 or 3 years because at that point in your story and that point in our story, there was such an overlap. But that rests on a really honest conversation about what we might call the purpose prerogative. You know, it's only good if it's serving your purpose and my purpose.
Yep.
And I think of the colleagues that I have had who have been going through the motions or openly disruptive or just not very effective anymore.
Mm.
I suspect what's gone on is that they've moved past the point where I was learning anything out of this. And it's,
Mm.
therefore, it's in one sense safe for the organisation because you think, well, here's Mushtaq. He knows how to do this thing brilliantly. He's done it for many years. If I just keep him doing that, everybody will
Mm.
be happy. But Mushtaq's not happy because he's thinking, I'm
Mm.
bored now. I, I can't really see anything. This is not serving my purpose.
Mm. I
And I
think
think
this is.
you're particularly good at getting colleagues and students to reflect on what their actual purpose is. And then there's a real gift in trying to navigate that into a conversation about, so what should you do next in this organization, in this job?
Mhm. And one of our future conversation, I'm sure, is going to be around purpose and how to articulate it and how to find it. But I think that the point that you've just elucidated, which is about, yes, we keep people together as long as it is productive and happy and helpful both to the team, the organization, and the individual. And when that uh, is no longer there or runs out as a map, then it's absolutely fine for people to go and pursue their own map, maybe in a different territory, which is fine. And I think for leaders to be ready uh, to when to let people go and actually bless them and be very happy for them to move away. So we are saying basically, purpose is what brings people together, and when there is some divergence, then it's absolutely fine for people to move on. But the ownership of the purpose, the making sure that it is central to the thing that we do, something everybody does. But I think most of the work needs to be done by the leader there.
Yeah. And And I would just add a couple of things to that. One, I would go slightly further than it's absolutely fine, and I would say it's absolutely essential that
Essential,
people
yeah.
move on because otherwise it just becomes stagnant, and that's not
Right.
healthy.
Mm.
But I can also think of examples where there's so much conversation about purpose that it's not very purposeful in terms of doing the work. And I'm just going to connect that to the earlier part of today's conversation about what the name of the podcast should be. You know, you
Mm.
could spend all of your time trying to align purpose. It's just brilliant that we're so aligned. Are we still aligned? Yes, let's talk about it
Yeah.
again tomorrow. And recognizing that the work is actually it's both that and not that.
Yes. Yeah, this reminded me of a gentleman. His name is Idris Jala, and he was the CEO of Shell and CEO of Malaysian Airlines, and for a while was a minister in the Prime Minister's department, responsible for government delivery and transformation. And of course, later he spun out this whole the department within the Prime Minister's department. When there was a change in the government, they sort of pushed them out, and he spun it off as a company. So it's called Pemandu, and he talks about transformation, and he anchors it first to the profit and loss statement. He say, if you want to transform a company, you start from there, and then you align the other things to it. And to his mind, which I think there is a truth to it. He say there are so much transformation that actually start looking at the culture first, without actually looking at the profit and loss in an organization. And that's he thinks that this is the probably the sequence. It's not that culture is not important. Culture is very important, but sequencing it to just say, "Oh, let's have a more appreciative culture," but you are hemorrhaging your resources, and in a short while, you won't be able to pay salaries, no matter how great as a leader you are. People will perceive you as have failed. So I think that is again the focus of the leadership is such an important thing as well.
Yeah, and I would love to have a future conversation just on that paradox,
Mm,
because here's a thing which has troubled me for all of my research life studying leadership and strategy is the businesses and organizations which are amazing and do genuinely world-class, mold-breaking, record-breaking things often have this narrative which is we don't really focus on the money, we focus on the other things and the money just comes.
yes.
Right? And so we focus on customer service, and if we get that right, we'll make money. I hear
Mm,
that lots of times in these stories,
mm,
often from fabulously wealthy organizations and individuals who clearly don't
right.
have to worry whether they're going to break even or pay the salary bill that month. And the thing that I always find so difficult is if you're in a business which is failing and in danger of being liquidated, and then the real thing is like, but did I
Mm,
ship the order in time? Did the customer pay? Will I be able to
yeah.
pay my mortgage? Will I be able to pay my employees? And there's a chicken egg thing going on about which comes first, being
Mm,
healthy or being financially healthy or being culturally healthy.
mm.
There's
I think what
as you know, there's a famous Scottish comedian, Billy Connolly, who tells a great story, a great joke or story about the relationship between conventional medicine and alternative and complementary medicine.
mm,
And he said, if you've turned up at a road accident where somebody's, lost a limb and is losing blood, what you don't know is what you don't need is somebody offering to apply some marjoram to their temples or to, do Reiki on them. You need conventional medicine to
that's right.
stop the bleeding and
That's right.
reestablish your blood pressure. And so there's a really interesting thing, I think, about high performance and leadership in high performance environments, particularly when the context is changing so fast in a mapless world, and thinking about which is the primary focus of attention in the immediate short term.
Mm.
Is it this cultural thing or is it this financial and economic sustainability?
I really like that, and I think just to make sure that I have conveyed the message from Idris Jala correctly, he is not necessarily saying that culture is not important, but he
No.
sees culture as informing this. So you start by looking at the profit and loss, and then anchor things so that they support the initiatives that you want, rather than you go and maybe spend money on something that's probably great and make people feel good, but doesn't help with the profit and loss, and eventually your business or is going to be liquidated, which is not what you are after. But
Yeah,
I really like the idea that we will take this as one of the chapters on the conversations to see how we view it through this notion of a map has run out, and sometimes like some of these companies that were doing so well, and the world changes or their internal world changes, and suddenly they are not doing so well. And so, what is the pathway to transformation now? I think that's a very
yeah,
powerful thing to explore as well. I agree with you.
good. So as always, we've generated lots more conversations we could have. I guess we better draw this one to a close. But that's been really fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually wanted to probably before we end this, if you don't mind, is to just reflect in our traditional way on how do we or what is the message from this to our students, to the young people who are graduating, uh, being part of teams at a time where AI and technology is disrupting the world.
So I would have a couple of takeaways. One is that it is really important to fit in, and
Mm,
that there's a conscious choice for you in terms of the immediate short term and fitting in, because you might have to curb some behaviors or accept some things which maybe aren't how you would do it. And that is important if you want to be productive. But it's also important to think in the longer term about, well, if I suppress the fact that I have to fit in this team in this way for this period of time, what's the cost to me? And if the answer is actually you should be in a different setting with a different kind of culture and a different team, you really need to listen to that, particularly at the start of your career, because it's harder to. I found it becomes easier to say, I just don't like this environment and move on as you get older because you become more sanguine about it. And the second thing that I would say to a young student is be really, really clear what you bring to the team.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
if it's just more of the same and learning, if it's just map reading, then I think you'll find it less enjoyable and the team will find you less easy to completely notice and appreciate and acknowledge.
Mm. Mm. And I would add that element of having a clear sense of purpose. And even if the team or even the leader of the team is not recognizing that, just reminding them of how important is this. Because again, someone may go into a team, and the team is set in the way that they're doing things. But actually, a fresh graduate coming in, there is actually quite a unique opportunity for them to introduce a new life, a new oxygen into the team. So I would probably also encourage them to reflect over the fact that they have something to add, and to be brave enough to introduce that, and see how can they. I mean, to your point, the value that they add is not just by following, but sometimes by being slightly challenging, and bringing that closer to the youth kind of understanding and perception.
Be a disruptor in the nicest possible way.
Absolutely, and follow your purpose.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, it's great to have this conversation. Looking forward to the next one, and enjoy Scotland today.
Yep. And enjoy Malaysia this evening.
I will. Thank you.